we're gonna look at the card that surprisingly, this card is not a new Master Duel only card, okay? Surprisingly, the card that was leaked to be Master Duel exclusive, yada 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 yada, shocker, is actually just a regular card from Phantom Nightmare, that they have just, you know, dropped an ad a little bit before it was supposed to go out or something like that, you know? They just randomly published the advertisement before they published the announcement for the card, which is probably going to be, it's probably the reason why, you know, it's just like, a company like Konami has a lot of different, you know, offices and so on and so forth, and different, whatever it's called, and they don't always work, like, you know, together, and sometimes things like this happen. The one thing I will say, I know, Chad, I know you don't have to type it for the 5th time. The card is coming to Master Duel significantly sooner than usual, which is an interesting thing that we can talk about in a little bit. But first, let us look at the card and see if it even matters. The card in question is called Prisoner Princess of Fruitful Flames. It is a Link 3 fire monster, and I think it's like generic fire support from what I've seen. Which makes sense, right? That's kind of like the theme of this year, which is like, I think it's kind of cool that they've chosen to give like a specific attribute a lot of support. Because fire, you know, outside of specific fire archetypes, has never really had like good standalone cards or whatever. So here we go. We have a Link 3 Fire Fiend with Link arrows left, right, bottom, materials 2+ effect monsters, so very generic. You can only use the 2nd and 3rd effect of this card's name each once per turn. You cannot special summon monsters except fire monsters. During your main phase, you can special summon a fire monster from your graveyard. If a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field while this card is in your graveyard, you can target a fire monster you control and a monster your opponent controls, destroy them, and if you do, special summon this card. I will say, I read this card yesterday, so this is not a blind reaction. I don't want to act like it is. I had some time to think about this card, and I personally think this card is phenomenal. I personally think this card is great. I will say one thing. I have a couple problems when it comes to cards that allow link climbing. We've talked about this in the past, right? I'm not a fan of when a Link 2 summons another monster, so it essentially makes a Link 3. And I don't like when a Link 3 summons another monster, so it essentially makes it a Link 4. Because I think that is dangerous on cards. You know, I think it's dangerous when a Link 4 is designed to require 4 monsters, but then any 2 monsters make it because the Link 2 summons a monster, the Link 3 summons a monster, so they go into a Link 4. The one thing on this card that makes it better is that it's locking you into fires. So if you're trying to use this card to Link climb, it's not going to be as simple as, you know, just put 3 monsters on the board and you have an access code talker, right? That is not something that's gonna work. It also is not a Cyberse monster, which is the type that is most notorious for link climbing. But what this card does is, I think exactly what it's supposed to do. It gives huge support to every single fire archetype out there. Every single deck that has a fire Link 4 is going to appreciate this card a lot. Things that come, the first thing that came to my mind, you already know, this card is very good in Salamangreat, I think. This card also is great in something like, you know, we've looked at the new Infernoid Link 4, and we were like, okay, but like Infernoids aren't going to be pumping out Link 4s anytime soon, but that now could happen, right? Rescue Ace is probably going to appreciate this card, right? Depending on what Link 4 they want to go into or whatever. But I think one of the most notable aspects of this card is that it's not only an extender on your first turn. It's not only an extender on your first turn. After you're done linking with this card, when the card essentially has already like fulfilled its purpose, right? You've already used it to go from, let's say let's use the Salamangreat example. You have like a Sunlight Wolf and a monster underneath it. Then you go into this, you bring back the monster from the grave, makes it much easier to go into the new Phoenix Link 4, right? Much simpler. even after you've achieved all that, this card is now a disruption in your graveyard, right? It's phenomenal. If a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field while it's in the grave, target one of your fires and one monster your opponent controls, pop them, and bring this back. It's actually, considering that this basically goes into your graveyard for free, you know, it's just, I think this is great. I think this is a great card for fire decks. Is this gonna make every single fire deck meta? Probably not, but it's like, it's a phenomenal card to have. It's a phenomenal card to have in every single deck that's fire, especially if the deck has a Link 4 monster. Any fire deck with a Link 4 is really gonna enjoy this card. So yeah, I think this is a very, very good card that is going to see play in the decks that it's meant to be played in. And it's going to make those decks stronger, right? This card alone would probably make Salamangreat end boards a lot easier to achieve and better because they have one more disruption, right? So I'm a fan of this card. I think it's great. I like the fact that you cannot use it for link climbing in like generic decks, right? In every deck. Because this card has some generic applications. Like, it can revive any fire monster, which means you can even use it in any deck and revive like an Ash Blossom. The question is, what do you do with it, right? Because as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not trying to... I don't think there's a very, very good generic Fire Link 4 that we can climb into in like every deck, right? There's no like... There's nothing that's like really, really strong that we can go into in every deck, right? Ambo Whale, let me see. Let me read this real quick, just for context, because this could matter. Okay, it is a Link 4. It's a fire. It's 2+ effect monsters. Gains 200 attack for each Link monster in the grave. You can only use each effect once per turn. If this card is destroyed, target a Link 3 or lower in either graveyard, special summon it. If a Link 3 or lower on the field is destroyed by a battle or card effect, banish this card in the grave, banish destroy card of field. If this card is destroyed, target a Link 3 or lower, special summon. If a Link 3 or lower is destroyed by a battle or card effect, banish this card, destroy one. You pop this with her? Yeah. But... you know how I would like this a lot more? If those two effects were swapped. If this card on its own destruction destroyed another opponent's card, I would like that synergy. I would like that synergy, but the way this is like... if this dies, it can revive a Link 3 or lower, which doesn't really do anything on your opponent's monster, on your opponent's turn. So yeah, it's like, you have to like... you would have to wait for... like, this comes back, destroys this. And then later on, when this dies, then you get to pop a card. Which is, like, fine synergy. I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough for this combo to see play in, like, generic decks. This card is... I think that's good. Let me make that clear. I think it's good that the good uses for this card by far are like in the decks, like in fire decks, right? In fire decks, this is a really good card. In other decks, this is probably a mediocre card that's not gonna see play, which is exactly how they're supposed to do Link monsters or specific archetypes or like attributes, right? They're not supposed to be good in every deck that has an Ash Blossom in it, right? Because it instantly makes a freaking access code talker or whatever, right? That was one of their biggest mistakes with something like Selene, right? Selene should have just had a similar thing, like you can only summon spellcasters or whatever, right? Something like this, right? Just make Pit Knight. What's the point? Why would I, if I have 3 monsters on the board, why would I link those 3 monsters into Prisoner Princess of Fruitful Flames to bring back 1 monster to make Pit Knight? If I can just make Pit Knight with 2 out of those 3 monsters, only to put this thing into the graveyard, it's not that powerful. It's not that powerful as a disruption that I'm not gonna like investing 3 monsters into a Pit Knight on the board and this in the graveyard is not that good. It's not just make an IP Masquerena and summon a Little Knight on your opponent's turn. Like if you have 3 monsters on the board, just make an IP, pass, and make SP Little Knight. That's stronger. That is much better. Either way, chat, I think it's a great card. And I'm saying that partially because I love Salamangreat and I hope that this card helps them be a little bit better. Even though the deck still probably has its problems. But mostly I'm a fan of this card because I think the design is very cool. I think the design is very cool because they've given this card 2 very powerful effects that even synergize with each other. But they've put, in my opinion, a fitting restriction on it to make sure it only goes into the decks that they actually want to buff with this, right? Because it's clearly meant for fire decks, which is kind of like the theme of 2023 or one of the themes in 2023, and I think that's great. I think that's great. Maybe it's Snake Eye support. Maybe. The thing is, most of the time, chat, you're going to want to use this card for link climbing, right? Yes, reviving a fire monster can work in every single deck, but this card, once you've used its revive effect, you want it off the field. You want to link it off, right? Which means you have to play a deck that can play fire link monsters. If they make a link 4 Snake Eyes monster, yeah, very strong card. But in its current iteration, as far as I'm aware about Snake Eyes, they don't have any, like, I don't think they have much link 4 synergy or anything like that, right? Is 2,700 attack for a link 3 a good stat line? It feels kind of high. It's on the high side, I would say. It's on the high side, but it's all right. It's not, like I said, you are incentivized to put this card into your graveyard anyways. So yeah, Rescue Ace, Infernoid, Infernoble, Salamangreat, most of those decks are probably going to really appreciate this card. Infernoids do get a link 4. That's why I'm saying this. Maybe Fire King. Does Fire King have do Fire Kings get their own link monsters? I'm not quite sure. No? Okay. Either way, we're starting off strong here. The card that they... I'm not too surprised by this because they decided to make this like an advertisement on Master Duel and so on and so forth. So I expected this card to be decent, and it is quite powerful. And now let's move to... Let's move this aside, because normally when we look at new cards that are being revealed in the OCG, we're talking like months away, right? For us. Which is the case for this card as well in the TCG. However, for some reason, and I don't know what the reason is, this card is releasing in Master Duel, I believe, next week. Like 5 days or something? Isn't it like the 30th of October or something like that I heard? It's like incredibly soon. Voreth, think about a 13. Where was I? The Ray copy pasta threw me off. Anyways. This card releases in Master Duel in a couple days. 5 days to be exact, which means... When is that? Monday? Monday, after the Duelist Cup, right? After the Duelist Cup, if I'm not mistaken. I don't wanna chat right now. It's after the Duelist Cup, I'm pretty sure. I am very curious about like why that is, like why they're deciding to release this card like way earlier in Master Duel than usual. Do we know anything else about the newest like set? Do we know anything else about this the Master Duel pack that's dropping in 5 days that has this card? No. nothing. We know nothing other than there's gonna be a pack in 5 days that has this card and some other stuff. Only its name? What is the name? What is the name of the pack? Record of Noble Spirits. Okay. Well, that sounds like it's gonna be a Noble Knight angle. But yeah, that is the one. That is the one thing I could think of, is like they are trying to release something into Master Duel, fire related. And they wanted this card to be there early to help maybe sell the next pack or whatever, right? Like, it could be Infernoble support. It could be the new Salamangreat cards, which we also don't have in Master Duel yet. I don't know. I think guessing here is kind of pointless because it's going to be out in 5 days anyway. So we're going to see. We're going to see at the start of next week what it means. I think, for one, that this sets an interesting precedence, because it's like, this means that we don't necessarily have to always wait 6 months for a card to be released at Master Duel. This means they are potentially willing to break with that tradition, almost, where cards are being released very, very late into Master Duel, right? And that is good. You know, I think that's good. I personally think it's good. It also means that it shakes up the format. I'm always a big fan. I've kind of accepted the fact at this point. I've kind of accepted at this point that the cards in Master Duel come out later. But if you accept that fact, I at least prefer it to be released in maybe slightly a different order, or some cards significantly sooner than others. That way it feels like a different format than just playing the same TCG format over and over and over again. And this card, I think, is going to help that as well. Like, it's going to make it feel a little bit different. Like, for example, once the Salamangreat support comes out, we can play the deck differently than we could in the TCG back then. Anyways. Okay, so that's enough about this card. This card was, honestly, it was... I just thought it was funny because of how, like, overhyped this card was, because of the way it was revealed through, like, a PlayStation ad, and everyone's like, oh my god, what does this mean? What does this mean? And all that it really meant was, well, it's a card that's in the next main set, but it comes out in Master Duel a little bit sooner than usual. That's what it meant. But it's a pretty good card, so that's cool.